Hello there, this is Donna Reiners,
And Jen.
where we are having our Friday friendship, where we try to solve all the world's problems, or maybe just one. And today we had a prime example of what we're going to talk about today, which is making lemonade out of lemons. And Jen had a great example.
Well, one of my favorite movies that I haven't watched in a long time came to my mind. It's called You've Got Mail. The more, I think there's an old-timey version, but the one that I like is with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. It's kind of old now, but but there's a scene where the elevator gets stuck, and it's Tom Hanks and the security guy or elevator guy, and then there's this lady, I think she's like a dog with her, and then there's this other man, and then there's Tom Hanks's girlfriend at the time. They're all stuck in this elevator, and so it kind of fast forwards, shows them that they've been there a while, and they're all sitting on the ground, and the elevator or security man or whatever, he's like, if I ever get out of here, I'm marrying so-and-so. He's like, I don't know why I haven't yet. I love her. And it's like this, kind of revelatory
Epiphany.
moment. And then this lady's like, if I ever get out of here, I'm speaking to my mama again. And she has kind of like this life-changing moment. And then somebody else says something else. And then it comes to Tom Hanks, and he's like, looking very pensive. He's like, if I ever get out of here. But before he can finish his sentence, the girlfriend who's rummaging through her purse goes, oh, where are my Tic Tacs? And then she looks up and everyone's like, and she's like, what? And so the next scene basically shows that he had clarity in that elevator. And so he came into the elevator with this girl that he was already kind of iffy about. And he left the elevator without the girlfriend and just his dog. So that was a perfect opportunity for the lemon turning into lemonade for him and all the other people except that girl.
Yeah, she chose to stay a lemon.
She chose to stay focused
She was
on
blind to
herself
being a
and her
lemon.
Tic Tacs in the midst of these life-changing decisions.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was just a funny example that came to my mind.
No, that's good. It was a great way to start today's broadcast. So we have just a few examples of making lemonade out of lemons. A couple of them are just not necessarily casual, but more norm, and then there's a couple of deep ones. So we thought we'd just take them a little bit at a time. Just a few. Let's see. Okay. So for instance, today we were at Cafe Maurice, and we ended up talking with a couple of ladies that just seemed very special and very kind, and we ended up having a conversation that seemed to impact them in a strong way. And they told us, we changed our mind at the last minute to come here. They took a different route literally at the last moment, and then what awaited them was some strong encouragement. So that's a simple example of how you can take a different route and it end up being in your favor, something good for you. And then also, I had a meeting with someone today, and that ended up being something completely different than what I thought it was going to be altogether. And it was an appointment very providential for the woman that I met. And so that was a different route for her and a different route for me. And so those are simple things. Can you think of a time when you took a wrong road or something? Or can you think of a time when you took a wrong road and you're like, wow, I'm glad I took this wrong road?
I was trying to think of a specific example. I know this has happened to me many times when feeling like I was delayed for an appointment or waiting in a long line or there was traffic or I was late to something. I feel like this happens in our daily life and we don't always recognize it for what it is. Mm-hmm. But I have literally met people for the first time or had a one-time encounter that was actually a blessing for me and or that other person, and things ended up working out, like maybe the appointment got delayed, or sometimes there are occasions where you're still late, but there was still lemonade in the mix. And sometimes it's like everything worked out in the favor, like right. You got there and it wasn't a big deal that you were late because the meeting hadn't even started yet, or things like that. I think that happens actually quite a bit.
And sometimes there's a road that is given to us and we have no choice over. And at the time, it's scary, and we don't know what to think, and yet we don't know what to do, and we don't know what it means, and we don't know what the future's going to hold. Yet in retrospect, later, like, wow, I'm glad I went through that transition, or wow, I'm glad that I'm no longer at XYZ or doing XYZ, because this is really where I'm supposed to be today. I thought of an example when I married Craig. I married into a family, and the kids were 9 and 11. And at that time, I used to get lost. I don't have that issue like I did, but I used to get lost when I'd be driving down the road. And especially for some reason when it was with Chelsea. And so what would happen, instead of getting frustrated and upset with myself, which I could have very easily done, I decided to make lemonade. So when we got lost, we would stop and we would get ice cream at one of the grocery stores, because you know what? I didn't have a phone that had GPS then, right? So it's like, oh, let's stop and get some ice cream. And I wouldn't necessarily tell her that we were lost, because I'm thinking, man, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got to get her here. I got to go there. And so one time we went to see someone in a hospital, went to the wrong hospital. And while we were there, I thought, well, since we're here, let's go upstairs and see the babies. So we went upstairs on the 4th floor, and lo and behold, a baby literally came out when we arrived. And so it was a very special moment. She remembers it, and I remember it, of when, wow, it was just beautiful to see a new baby come out. And so that was a very special, good memory that could have been a bad memory had I had a bad attitude or been upset with myself or what have you.
Another movie just came to my mind. I don't even know what's up with the movie references right now. But in the original Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio from back in the 80s, Mr. Miyagi, back in the day, Pat Morita, which most of you have probably seen it or know the references. But there are so many things that Mr. Miyagi, his mentor, trainer, sensei guy, tells him to do that he's like, what in the world? Like, he has him wax all these cars this very particular way, not the easy way, not the quick way, but he has him doing very specific moves of waxing on and the waxing off and wax it on and wax it off. And it takes him a very long time to do, but he keeps having to do all these little weird little tasks.
And the kid had a bad attitude, by the way.
Yes, lemons. It felt like lemons to him. However, when he was at his big tournament or whatever they called it back, I don't remember the fight scenes, he used all those moves that he had trained in without realizing it, and all became the lemonade. And he was like the hero of all little karate heroes.
That's right. So much so that they made Karate Kid Part 2
and 3 and later the next Karate Kid, and now like there's a whole new series decades later. There's all kinds of spawns from that. But my point was that sometimes the lemons can come in the form of basic everyday disciplines, or a season where things feel like you're just pushing against something that's not moving, or it just feels like going through the motions, or rote things. I just thought of another movie where there's a little girl who practices ballet every day. She does her little pliés.
Okay, plié, pirouette.
At the bar.
You know.
And she does like hundreds of them every day, and it just looks so boring, just going up and down and doing her little things. But she says fundamentals are the foundation of fun. And so an adult quotes it later in a different context, but because she learned from that little girl that it looks boring like lemons, like who would want to do that every single day? It's doing nothing. But it was training her body and training her mind in the process. And so she ended up doing this beautiful dance at the end where she had trained herself.
Okay, movies. I'm going to do a movie too. Doggone it. Have you ever seen Behind Enemy Lines? Anybody seen it? If you have, throw me some hearts.
Highly recommend.
The blonde-haired dude. He's got a brother. What's his name?
Wilson.
Owen Wilson. Anyhow, in this movie, Gene Hackman is his general or whatever, an admiral, and Owen is and he's a pilot. Anyway, and he is sick and tired of routine. He's like, what is all this for? We go in, we go out. We do all these things all the time, and there's just nothing to them, and there's no reason to do this. I want out. And then he and his flyboy were out one time doing a mission, one of those little test missions, and they went against the rules and went off course and actually ended up crashing. Then all of a sudden, all those fundamentals came into play, and he knew how to hide. He knew how to use his camouflage. His friend actually got shot and killed, and he was left alone behind enemy lines. And everything that he had learned came in. And I remember because Gene Hackman said to him, "Straighten up, you're a soldier." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a soldier." And so sometimes we have lemonade because of those lemons. Life can throw us lemons. Listen, when I was a little kid, there was a lot of rejection, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of abuse in different ways. And because of that, it really moved me into the mode that I have today in helping people. I'm very thankful for that. I have a compassion that a lot of people don't have. I'm not saying I weep at everything, but on the inside I have a compassion, I have an understanding. I have a place in there where I get it, I connect with this. I want this resolved in your life. I want this whole in your life. There is a man whose mom was diagnosed with MS when he was 5 years old. And because of that, he had this hunger and this desire to do something to help his mom. Well, now, 45 years later, probably not that long, 30 years later, I think, he has a technology he has come out with that is literally allows his mom to be able to feed herself. And he has helped thousands and thousands of people connect from their brain to their body so that the alignment is there so that they can function in life. And so that was a lemon that was thrown his way as a little kid that turned into a seed that caused him to find a science that would bring health and healing to humanity. That's big. I have one more, and I'm going to go with Jen. My mom got sick, and she died when I was 18. That has been used in many, many ways in my life to walk out life with people who have experienced death and dying and be able to live to tell about it. Many want to give up their life when someone they love, when their life ends. And this has been almost 40 years ago. And so I'm living proof that you can heal from a deep, 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 deep cutting wound, cutting place of pain. And because of that, I go deep, deep, deep with people to help them discover their wounds so they can be free from their emotional pain.
Mine goes along with that. Only 1 year ago, it was from November to January, my dad was at home ill, about to move into the heavens. And we didn't quite know the timeline or what that would even look like, but God blessed my brother and me to be able to come from different towns and to stay at my parents' house during that season. So it was the four of us. Sometimes my sister-in-law was able to come from out of town, and my nephew and things like that. And there were friends and family that came to visit here and there, but for the most part, it was our little family of four. We had not all four lived in a house together in many years. So we've all matured as adults, individuals and in our own lives. And even though we love each other, there's a whole different dynamic when you're living under one roof. And for two of us out of the four, it was not our own house. And so I, for example, was living out of a suitcase in the hall for a couple of months and sharing a bed with one or two other people, like just in, but in that sort of, in those intense dynamics of just the season with the health and everything else. I mean, it's like your priorities just kind of shift because you're like, this is the way it's going to be. But there were a lot of what could have been strong lemons during that time. On different levels, but the one I'm highlighting right now is just the dynamic of living under the same roof and figuring out schedules and who's going to be responsible for what and how can we be flexible with each other and have grace with each other as we're each processing all the dynamics that are going on here and dealing with things from back home in our own other respective towns and all of that. It was very intense and very difficult. However, it was beautiful because there was no other way that we could have bonded again as a family in that way. That was the only pathway to that thing. And so God used it in a beautiful way that can never be taken from us because it's so deep. Another dynamic during that season was I had left town the plan was to go for like 2 days away to take care of some business at home and to get a little bit of like a breath before I came back and dove in to help with everything. Well, during that like 2 days away, I was in a car accident with Donna. So I had an initial check to make sure, nothing was broken, etc. But I couldn't really seek any kind of treatment until later. And so I went back to the family situation and caring for my dad and being with all of that, being in pain, having really bad alignment in my neck and my back and all kinds of things. And that was major lemons thrown my way. However, one of the most precious moments was that my dad offered to pray for me. Wow, I might cry.
Okay.
He offered to pray for me because I was in such pain. It was one of the most precious moments of the whole time. I kind of forgot about that. And I was actually helping my mom with something in the garage. And I was trying to be careful not to move my neck a lot because it was really painful. But she was moving something heavy toward me, and it accidentally like really hurt, really bad. And he saw that, and he, even in his weakened state, and even his neediness,
his pain,
so much of his strength was coming out in all these beautiful ways. And so it was a major lemons to lemonade scenario. And so there was just a lot in that season where God is really kind and faithful and using every single detail for good. Like nothing is ever in vain. I just want to throw that out there before I hand it back to Donna. That sometimes we don't see the lemonade until later. But he doesn't waste one single little point of pain. Something that might seem so minute or like a side thing where this was like the main issue, but there's all these little streams offshooting it. He doesn't waste any of it. So if you haven't seen the lemonade part,
there's
just
still time.
know he turns all bitter things into sweet. You can't make lemonade just out of a straight lemon. It's just straight lemon juice. You have to add the sweetness. And that's what he does. And you have to add the water. And he brings the balance so that you still know that there was lemons involved, but it's like an enjoyable, refreshing thing. It doesn't take away the lemon like as if it never existed. It transforms the whole experience into something actually enjoyable.
But perspective is everything.
Yeah.
You can be in the midst of something that's very hard and very harsh, where you feel so out of control and you want to give up, you want to give in, you want to turn back. Or it's so trauma driven from the inside that you get sick from it. And on the inside, you're just living in crisis. And I can tell you, the physical body doesn't know the difference. If you're in a horrible place, but yet you still, come on, don't shut me down when I say this, but if you choose to celebrate in the midst of a crisis, if you choose to celebrate in the midst of a horrible circumstance, your physical body doesn't know that it's not how you really feel. Your physical body feels the celebration, and then you begin to train yourself to respond to something that's horrible, that's negative, that's crisis-centered, crisis-driven, to a place of celebration, so that in the future, when something does happen, you automatically go, it's going to be okay, instead of always expecting the boom. Last year, I remember I kept breaking glass. I kept dropping things. I was like, what the heck? And I just felt the prompting on the inside to just celebrate. And so at first, they all thought I was nuts. I dropped these glasses, and I jumped up and I went, yay, I broke a glass, woo, I broke a glass, I broke a glass, whoo, whoo, I broke a glass, and they're like, what's wrong with you? And I said, I don't know. I feel like this is how I'm supposed to respond to this. And that began to do all these little things, and then we had the car accident. And I'd been in the spot already of turning these things into celebration. And so I'm not saying things don't devastate us, and I'm not saying I won't be devastated tomorrow. Come on. I'm just saying that I had for months already been saying, it's going to be okay. Just pick it up. Just work it out. Let's just take action and fix it and move on. Instead of taking that moment of crisis, or that moment of trauma, or that moment of pain, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, whatever, or that moment when it's like, what happened? Instead of taking and dwelling there, living there, camping there, creating more crisis from it. You can have a trauma hit you and a crisis hit you, and you can create more trauma on top of it, and you can create more crisis on top of it until you are so centered into the crisis and the trauma that you are trapped there. And it was not the original trauma. It wasn't the original problem. You can make it worse by deciding to invest all your emotions and all your time in dwelling on it and thinking on it and getting resentful about it, or feeling like it'll never be okay, and allowing yourself to just stay there so long that now all of a sudden you're shut down and you don't know how you got there. So if you train your physical body through your words, through your actions, on purpose, to say, well, this happened, but I'm gonna respond like this, when it makes no sense whatsoever, it might come in handy later as you move forward.
This painting behind us, I've been looking at this path. It's a really pretty painting. It's several things we've said kind of reminded me of this path, but thinking of the beauty and intentionality and being proactive ahead of time, like she said, with the glass breaking and the being grateful and the celebrating, it came in very handy when something more serious came about, because she was already in that mode, even though she still had to choose to where her focus would be after the accident and things like that. She was at least pointed in the right direction, and there was some movement in that direction, so that it was easier for her to walk that way. I think that's one thing that I'm working on again, that I haven't focused on nearly enough in a while, is that practice of being outwardly showing gratitude, which starts on the inside. And there's a lot of times I feel grateful, but for me right now, I'm feeling the real strong prompting to express the gratitude, to dwell on it, really meditate on what I'm grateful for, and to thank the people that may be connected with that, just to be really proactive, because it's I mean, we won't go into, there's so many things you can say about the power of gratitude. It really changes everything. It changes the inside of you. It changes your mindset. It changes your physical body. It changes your relationships. It changes everything. But forming those new pathways so that when things come around that you may not think to be grateful for, that would feel hurtful, or like even a betrayal, or just whatever, that I want the go-to to be like, well, where is the positive in this? And I want to give thanks where I can, and then trust God to intervene in the ways that only He can, if that makes sense.
Not that long ago, I had, and please hear me, I'm not saying I'll always do this. I'm not going to be so arrogant to say, this is always going to be, I got it together. What I am saying is, though, it was a few weeks ago, I had some pain that took place in my physical body. And I literally thought something really serious was wrong. I thought my mind went into all sorts of shenanigans, as you can imagine. It was such a severe pain. I was very afraid. I was so afraid that I wanted to go to the hospital. In the middle of the night, I had this issue for like 4 days, and I didn't know what to do. But my insides knew going to the hospital was not going to help me. that they would just give me some kind of shot, run some kind of test, and then say, well, we don't know what's wrong, and send me along my way with some pharmaceutical, which I might need sometime, but I knew it wasn't that time. And so, honestly, what I've finally figured out was it was sciatica. And what had happened is I had turned wrong. I had done some session work, and I had sat incorrectly for a long time. And it was from that moment. I remember those 4 days being so much pain, but I also remember just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you that I have a body to be in pain with. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I said it through weeping. I said it through tears. But it had been I know it had been because it had been going on for close to 2 years by then, that was in me to do that. And then I did have to go to a doctor of osteopath, and it took 2 appointments. I had my hips were out of place, my knees were out of place, my ankles were out of place. That just sitting wrong had done that and caused that severe pain so much that I was weeping. And so I'm saying that because the lemonade is the next time it tried to get me, I still had the Thanksgiving in place, but I also knew, hey, this has to do with I'm sitting someplace, and I knew what to do physically, and I was able to work it out quicker than I was that time that took me all that time. So I think, and you tell me what you think, I think that because of the Thanksgiving, because of the gratitude, because of the immediacy of it's going to be okay, that somehow, some way my body didn't stress and get tense as it did the first time, and it could out of fear and all those things. I think that somehow, some way that helped me not to have the same severity I had the last time. Now take that in your emotions, in the emotional realm and not the physical realm. When we have something happen, job loss, a death in our family, an accident of some kind, a friend betraying us, the real life stuff that sometimes we don't even talk about, the real life stuff that's on the inside that nobody always knows, because we've trained ourselves to just stay professional because we got work to do, stay on top of it because nobody here can know my business or what have you. If you can train yourself to have an authentic place of Thanksgiving, an authentic place on the inside that says, you know what, this sucks, I hate this, but I know somehow, some way, over time, this is going to work out for my good. I don't have the answer today, but I'm going to embrace the goodness right now. Your body doesn't know that it hasn't happened yet. Your mind still knows it sucks, but the body doesn't receive all the trauma it would receive had, get it? Your body isn't going to receive all the stress and all the trauma it would receive had you waited to be thankful later when everything was okay, when everything is worked out and everything's behind you.
That's good.
Anything?
Nothing super fresh is coming to my mind. We're talking about making lemonade out of lemons.
Out of lemons. And we are at Cafe Maurice in the Tomball Spring area, and very kind for Alan to let us use the front area. There's music in the other area, so we remained here where it's a little silent except for the street. Anyhow, do y'all have an experience or something you would want to share about a time when you didn't use Thanksgiving but things worked out, or you did use Thanksgiving while you were on the way to figuring it out? If you do, please put it in the comments. We'd love to hear. We'd love to know. We can all learn from one another. I was thinking, I just thought of something. If you remember Steve Jobs, who created all the Apple craziness that the world now uses, he started out in his garage and with a partner, and then he ended up getting fired by the company he actually started. You know, I believe I heard he was a little bit arrogant and a little bit maybe mean-spirited, I don't know for sure. But then he had to just double back and start over, and then he came back. And it turned into lemonade. And he talked about that being a good thing for him. Later, that was a good thing for him. And of course, we all know what Apple is. Even if you don't like Apple, you know who Apple is. And we know it's not the thing you bite into.
I heard, I don't remember exactly the number, but guesstimate, it was something like the average millionaire has gone bankrupt like 3 times or something. And which it sounds like, oh, that's an interesting fact, but when you really think about that, bankruptcy can devastate a person's life. It devastates the credit. It can devastate you, literally losing physically everything. It can devastate you relationally. It can devastate your self-esteem. You know, people can just throw in the towel and say, wow, what am I even doing? You know?
Yeah.
So for people to all just continuing to say yes again and just starting from scratch and just taking one step at a time, taking risks along the way. I mean, most people who have these super big success stories, what we would consider success, with a lot of money or a product that is very popular or some breakthrough that's helping people. It's taken massive investment, but they didn't know how it was all going to work out, and most of them, I would say probably everyone, has experienced some sort of heartache along the way because it was just literally one step at a time, and many, many lemons happened, and many, many what looked like failures or what looked like devastation happened along the way. I just think that's interesting that the average millionaire, I think it's like at least 3 times. I just found that very interesting.
I think that's because people who actually obtain real financial freedom many times own the money instead of letting the money own them. So the perspective of money, that it's your tool, is different than you can't survive without it.
True that.
And now I've never had that kind of money. I would love an opportunity to prove that money doesn't own me. Haven't quite had that yet, but hey, I was also thinking of Colonel Sanders. We've all heard the name Colonel Sanders. I actually posted something on my business page earlier today, starting early on in his life, all the way until his late 80s, all the different things that happened to him that were very, very negative, that could have destroyed him, where he could have really decided not to live anymore. He got breakthrough in his 60s and lived into his 80s and died a pretty rich man from what I understand. And I believe he lived maybe like close to a year in his car while he took his recipe around the nation, showing people, letting people taste and see that his chicken was good. And so perspective and determination and attitude, and I think gratitude, can really help us move forward in life no matter where we are, because really the physical body just doesn't know the difference. And I know there are different schools of thought in this, but listen, we are entering in the season right now where suicide is highest in the nation than any other time. And so it is a time when there are some folks around you that have a depression you can't see unless you get really close to them and look deep into their eyes. There are some around you with despair that you can't see unless you really get close and look into their eyes. There are some that are on drugs that have pulled them into shutdown because they've been in despair and depression or shut down in some way. And so I just want to encourage you to be on the lookout. Be alert, be engaged, be present, be aware of the man and woman to the right, and the boy and girl to the left, and the old person in front of you, or the ones behind you. You could change a life by bringing encouragement to someone. And I don't mean by saying, hey, you should be thankful for this or that, because some people aren't there. But you could say, hey, I'm thankful for you. Do you know, you let someone who doesn't feel like they have purpose when you let them know that you appreciate their presence, it engages them in life. There are many people that don't feel like they have any purpose. There are people on walkers. There are people in wheelchairs. There are people that have mental capacities, that some just don't feel like they have a reason to be alive. And it's because there's not a purpose attached to their life. Maybe they have a mental capacity that doesn't allow them to do something on a regular basis. Maybe there is a physical impediment and problem that doesn't allow them to do something viable or consistent long enough so that they can be trusted to have a purpose. Those people probably can be given purpose if you just meet them where they are, whether you give them 3 washcloths to fold, or you let them walk around the table gingerly and set the table. There are some things we can do to show gratitude and thanksgiving.
And like I was saying, that lemonade is actually lemons that have sweetness added to them and some water to help make the whole thing more enjoyable, not just tolerable. Sometimes we are the sweetness to someone else's lemons and we don't even maybe realize it. Sometimes we know, we're like, hey, we can do something here that will help bring a sweetness, but often it's just in living life, and we may not even realize the impact we're having on someone just by bringing a smile or by bringing kindness or just by sitting with someone, not necessarily going to some deep, lifelong invested conversation or something like that. For some people that's overwhelming and they're just like, oh, I can't commit to that. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is like a huge heaping help of sugar. I thought of another simple everyday example of something of just life on life stuff. One day there was a season where I literally had like almost zero money, like sometimes less than zero money. Like that's not an exaggeration. There was a day where I was going somewhere and I had like a couple of dollars and I was going to treat myself to get a breakfast sandwich or something like that in this drive-thru, and I was really excited because during that time that was a really big deal. Well, the person in front of me was taking a really long time, and normally I'm not super duper impatient, but I was,
might have been hungry.
I was getting irritated because wherever it was I was going, I needed to get there, and I was like, look, I just need my sandwich, and I just, whatever. And so I was kind of having a little attitude, and I mean, it felt like it was just taking way too long. And like the drive-thru person had to come back to the car a couple of times. I was like, what is the problem? So they finally drive away. I'm like, all right, God bless you. And so I drive up, because I often say that. And instead of having road rage, I don't usually do that. I'm just like, well, God bless us all, or like, thank you, Lord, for protecting us. Like, I just turn it all into that. I don't usually yell or get upset like that. Anyhow, I go up to get my food, and they're like, oh, the people in front of you paid for your food. And I'm like, oh, that's why it was taking so long. They had 2 different transactions. Probably it was a little confusing to the worker at first, things like that. So it totally stopped me in my tracks. And then I thought about in prior seasons how I used to do that frequently for people. I would buy the person behind me's meal, and how it was kind of like a little, I don't necessarily believe in like you do a good thing so it'll come back around and you'll get something done good to you. But that is a principle that does work. But it was just God's wanting to bless me and bring some sweetness into my lemon situation. But I had such an attitude that it kind of put me in my place. And but I remember another time where I was doing that for someone behind me, and all of the workers were so baffled. They literally brought like 3 people to the drive-thru window saying, wait, what are you doing? And wait, why are you doing that? And I remember one lady was from a foreign country, and she was so baffled. She like just sat there with her hands like this, the window, like, is this some sort of like pay it forward thing, or like why would you do this? And they were so amazed. I thought, why are they this amazed? It's not like this is some extreme act of kindness or so out of the blue. It's just a nice thing to do. But they were so amazed. I remember thinking, well, golly, God probably used that to impact them in some way that felt really like nothing to me. But it's just you don't really know the impact one more thing, quick.
You're fine.
One time,
we're talking about turning lemons
Yes.
into lemonade, by the way.
One time years ago, I was talking with someone who was really struggling with feeling like they had, like they weren't having the impact or the influence that they wanted to. They wanted to have a positive influence, but they felt like they were just really struggling. And so I was praying for this person, and I just saw this image in my mind. I felt like God was showing me that it was like they had scissors and they were cutting out the shape of a person, and how it was very detailed, but it was really difficult, and they wanted to do it well and just be very intentional with this person. And it was just taking everything they had. But what they didn't realize, it ended up being paper dolls. So as soon as they were finished with that one person, they let it go, and all this string of people were connected to that one person. It's really true that when we, one life touching a life, even if it's someone you pass in a hallway, or if it's someone you walk with for years, either way,
yes.
Life on life, we really can't measure the ripple effect impact. Yes. Don't underestimate that one door you held open for someone.
That's right.
It literally might have been the day that they were thinking about taking their own life.
That's right.
It is not cliche. It is not a cheesy little line. It is truth. I've heard people talk about things like that. Like, I was in the darkest place ever, and this one person did this little tiny thing, and it's like that little bit of light. And when you're in a dark place, a little tiny light ray is like major. And so anyway, just thinking about things like that, we can be the sweetness in someone else's lemon to make their life lemonade as well.
That's right. And a couple of just Bible thumping examples. If you think about David and the life of David, and how he was really not esteemed by his family that much, being left as a sheep herder, but how he was seen privately as the next king. And he had to endure a lot of things after taking down the giant. He had a lot of things he had to endure, and one of those things was running from the king for many years, and that king's intention was to kill him. It wasn't allowed to happen, but the torment that the king was under was what was coming after David. And though he wasn't allowed to kill him, and though he chose not to kill him, all of that strengthening that David did, though he was privately told he was king already, he had already been anointed the man, and then years endured, it was a strengthening. Had he looked at those opportunities as something so negative, I don't know that he would have passed the test to become the actual king that replaced the one who did eventually take his own life. And so I just want to encourage you today. There's lemonade for you. If you are in a time of lemons, stop, consider, how can you turn that situation into lemonade? How can you look at it as lemonade? Maybe you need someone else to help you make it lemonade. Or maybe you can turn it into lemonade yourself. Listen, we need to go. We bless you today. King David, he was the lemonade of that generation. He did some good things. He did some bad things. But God ultimately made lemonade out of the whole thing, because that's what God does, because he's the smartest person we know. I encourage you today and bless you today. And we'll see you next Friday for Friday Friendship, where we solve all the problems of the world. Or maybe just one. This is Donna.
And Jen.
Blessings to you. Hi, Nikki. Good to see you. Blessings. Bye-bye.